Good afternoon. I'm James Wallman. I hope you've had a fantastic afternoon. I saw some of the talks earlier and some people that I know, like Stephanie Riggs, and I'm sure that was pretty inspiring. So I'm James Wallman. Mark, thank you for the introduction. I am a futurist, have been for some years, and I'm going to be talking about how the 2020s, I believe, are a time of transformation and a time for transformation. So I just thought I'd give you a very brief introduction into how I read the future as to why I believe I can have a reasonable punt about what's going to be happening next. And this is a method I've been using since 2004, and it's really kind of simple. This was originally conceived in 1962 by a guy called Everett Rogers, and he was a sociologist. And this has been applied more than 5,000 times since then. And this is how ideas spread through any community. So what happens is we figure out what the innovators are doing. This is these people at the bottom here. And then what the early adopters are going to do, early majority, late majority, and laggards. And this is how ideas spread through any community. So it's been seen to happen in terms of doctors prescribing drugs. You can think of it in terms of hip hop taking off from the early 70s with a few rappers talking over records. And then you've got kind of Sugar Hill Gang and then Public Enemy and NWA. And here we are today where you turn on the TV and everyone has a kind of that hip hop beat. And so my job is to look at what these guys are doing, read as best I can the innovations that are happening, the interesting new stuff that's coming along. Look at I sometimes talk about the seed and the soil. So the innovations are the seed, and the soil is the macro environmental structure we live in, sociocultural trends, technology trends, science, innovations, etc. And by looking at what these guys are doing here today, we can have a reasonable punt about what's going to be happening in the future. I've been doing that since 2004, and it kind of works. So that's how I work as a futurist. So this is why I believe it's reasonable, and hopefully you might agree too, that I think that this is going to be a time of transformation here in the 2020s. But one of the things that I will often say to people, okay, is everyone gets very excited about what's changing. But it's really important to think about what's not going to change because, okay, we may become transhumans at some point and we are becoming closer to kind of cyborgs, etc. And we will do that over this century. But we are still flesh and blood humans. So there are fundamental things about us which aren't going to change. I have a picture of Mars here, as you can see. And this is a useful mnemonic to remember the stuff that isn't going to change. What we want as people is mastery, autonomy, relatedness, safety, status, and success. And that sense of security as well. And so mastery is being good at stuff. Autonomy is doing what we want to do. And relatedness is about friends and family and connections. What's his name? Jeff Bezos at Amazon talks about this. He says people are always really excited about, what's going to change. He's like, figure out what isn't going to change because you can build a business around that. And from your point of view, in terms of creating stories, in terms of changing the narratives, in terms of connecting with people, people are still people. So as excited as we can be about this is a time of transformation, we still have a bunch of people who we are trying to connect with. But things come along and major events do change things. And this is from 2011. And this was when the tsunami hit Fukushima in Japan. And there was the earthquake and there was the nuclear disaster. And this is an interesting point, I think, because you can see one of the things that happened here is people, I think it was something like 20,000 people were left, lost their homes, etc. And so there was lots of, especially for people, of course, in Japan, seeing on the TV everybody's belongings washed away. And there was a move at that point to care less about belongings. There were some interesting brand movements at the time. But one of the things that came out of this was a woman who wasn't known to us back then called Marie Kondo. And I think this was a really interesting point at the beginning of this move away from stuff to experiences. So what's important about this Fukushima thing is that when major events happen, world wars, and of course the pandemic, some things happen there are significant changes, and we've just been through that. So what happens at the beginning of things, they are opportunities for change. So you'll see post wars, you've seen significant changes in terms of social dynamics. And also just think about yourself personally and think about the people that you know. Most of us, and we've learned this, of course, from behavioral psychology, as well. Most of us stuck in the ruts. We do what we used to do. We are stuck in habits. That's how we operate. There's a lovely line from a guy called Jonathan Haidt in this book called The Happiness Hypothesis. He's a psychologist at NYU. And he says that he can conceive of the mind. The best way to think about it is he is the rider on an elephant. So as the rider, he thinks he's in control, but actually it's the elephant. It's the subconscious that's in control. And this idea about beginning is that if you think about when we all make changes, it tends to be the new year. It's like new year, new you. This is your chance to begin again. And I think what's happened in the pandemic is there is a chance for us to begin again. People are coming out of the pandemic different from the people who went into it. There's some interesting data. I've seen some data from the French hotel company Accor, and I'm seeing some other interesting data from White Hutchison, I'm mentioning here over in the States. But what's interesting to me is things like 38% of people say lockdown and challenges are the single most important event in their lifetime. 40% of people have learned the value of human interaction. Do you know what I love about that? Statistics are such funny things, because what makes me think is so 60% have not learned anything about the value of human interaction, and then 29% have enjoyed the slowdown, which would suggest that there's loads that haven't. I think statistics sometimes people like me can pull them out to support an argument, and you know that's what happens. But I think you think about yourself, think about the people that you know. When something comes along, it gives us a chance to evaluate, to reevaluate, and to think, wow, is this how we want to be? It's a chance for change. So I think about this time, I'm going to talk about an idea called experientialism in a bit, but as a time of experimentalism. I'm a trend forecaster, so I can make up silly words. You're going to see another one in a moment. But this is a time of trying things out. So just think about, well, in the UK, the numbers of people that have bought stand-up paddleboards and inflatable kayaks has been insane, because everybody's been stuck home. They're like, what should we do that's local rather than all these other things we used to do? And people are intending to continue the hobbies they started during lockdown. Some people are thinking of turning those hobbies into an actual business as well. But again, when something comes along and changes, it gives us a chance to think again. So a time for transformation. This is something I fundamentally believe in. It's the rise of experientialism. And it's worth pointing out here. So if you can read that word at the very top, experientialism, just going back, experimentalism. I wrote a piece for the FT. Actually, no, so they wrote a piece on my work in the FT for this book, Stuffication, quite a few years ago now. And the sub changed it to experimentalism, because it just didn't make any sense. But I think the two words are really useful: experimentalism for the 2020s and experientialism. So I self-published this book. First of all, nobody would take it. And the reason that 75 different publishers said no in New York and London was very clear. Well, they were generally quite polite about the writing, but the thing that they said they wouldn't take the book for, and a few almost took it, was that the idea was fundamentally wrong. It was a nice idea, congratulations, but the idea was wrong. But I self-published. The book got some coverage in a few different places, like the Financial Times, Fast Company in the States. And then it got picked up by Penguin, published in a few languages around the world, and it's had coverage in Le Monde and the New York Times, etc., lots of different places, and ABC in Australia and the BBC here, and CBC in Canada, MSNBC in the States, etc. And so in the 20s, I believe that we worried about too much stuff. This was the switch point, I think, from being materialistic to being what I call experientialist. So instead of being concerned about status and identity and meaning in material things, we realized the best places to get identity, status and meaning was in experiences instead. And the crucial thing here is that this stuffication inflection point, if you like, is we started to think about how to spend our money. And the psychologists figured out around that time that if you wanted to be happy, you were better off spending less on stuff and more on experiences. So now we've figured that out, I think there's something else happening. And this is partly because we're evolving. I think what's happening in the pandemic is it's turning that up and it's catalyzing this change anyway. But also, this is to do with what the psychologists are finding out too. So if you look at the bottom left here, in the 2020s, I think what's happening now is we're worrying about too little time, and we're learning how to spend our time better. And on the right here is a column that I wrote for Time magazine about this. But let me just bring this back a moment to try and make some sense of this. So this book, Stuffication, that I wrote, was about how to spend your money. How should you spend your money as a consumer today? Should you spend it on stuff or experiences? Turns out the answer is experiences. Once you know that, you then think, okay, now I'm going to spend on experiences. And people would say to me, okay, James, what kind of experiences should I choose? I want to talk to people much cleverer. This is where this book, Time and How to Spend It, came from. And the answer I found by talking to psychologists and sociologists at places like Stanford and Oxford and Cambridge and NYU and MIT, etc. And when you think about that question, what kind of experiences should I choose? What you're spending there is, okay, sure, you may well be spending money, but you're spending a much more important currency, and that's the currency of time. And I think what's happened in the pandemic, we've been much more aware of the time that we have, and we want to spend it better. And I think what's going to happen, we're going to learn how to spend our time better. At the same time, there's this thing called the experience economy, which is bubbling along for some time as well, and really starting to take, I believe, centre stage. This is a fundamental idea in that there is a long-term structural shift in the fabric of advanced economies. And it's worth pointing out, I'm just going to come back to this idea of experientialism for a moment. I don't believe that this is a trend for like autumn, winter 2021, and it will be a new trend next year. The people at Penguin, after this book, would come to me and say, so what's the next big trend, James? And I said, no, this is not a cyclical thing. This is not like a microflorals or pattern colors. This is not like a fashion trend. This is a fundamental socio-cultural trend. I believe it's one of the key trends of our time. And at the same time, from an economic point of view, we're moving, and if you can see in this graph, from commodities to goods to services to experiences. This is what matters to people. This is how you can, from a brand point of view, you can be less commoditized and you can connect with people as well. And you can see this goes to the next phase, which is to transformations. So the way to stand out and the way to connect with people at a time when goods have been commoditized, services have been commoditized. You just think for a moment what staying in a hotel in a random place used to be like. Go back to, if you're as old as me, the 80s or the 90s. Hotels were pretty terrible. Pub meals were pretty terrible. Services were pretty spotty. But now when you go and stay in a hotel, even a budget hotel, the bed's going to be good. It's going to be good enough. It's going to work. So the way to stand out today is through experiences. And as we move into the 2020s, it's going to be more transformations as well. It's not just me that believes this. So I've set up this World Experience Organization, but I have there are people from 26 countries who have got in touch to apply to get involved. We've got experts from Shanghai to San Francisco, from Melbourne to Helsinki, etc. The British government is interested in the experience economy, large companies, even Accenture, the big management consultancy. And this is where it's going. So the psychologists, the professors are now kind of going to the next phase. And I'm going to borrow from my friend Ben here. I think we're moving towards a eudaimonic technology in which the new experience design principles are more systematically applied. Some people have done it already. There are some amazing experiences out there. But systematically applying them is going to mean better experiences for people. So there's a whole bunch of books that have come out in recent years. This is an update of the experience economy. We have Stephanie, who you saw, I think you heard from earlier, The End of Storytelling. We've got Ben's book, The Age of Experiences, Designing Experiences, the Transformational Travel Journal, Gamification in Tourism. This is the kind of next level. And here's a bunch more of these books that are being published in the last few years, and there are more coming, which is all about how to design better experiences. And I want to throw this in here, because the thing is, we're all snowflakes. We're all different. You might like heavy metal, kind of wild nights out. I might like reading a book and camping. My wife is a really good example. We're booking a camping trip at the moment. She just doesn't want to go. She has no interest, but she really likes experimental theatre, which kind of leaves me quite cold. But we're also all snow. And what I mean by that is there's a sort of baseline. There are commonalities between all of us, and we can use those to figure out how to create better experiences. I've done this in my work with this stories checklist, as you can see if you read down story, transformation, etc. These are, from what I can figure out and from the conversations I've had and the research that I've read, these are the things that you should aim for in an experience to connect with somebody, and you're more likely to help them be happy and successful and live a better life. So one of those is story. You guys will know this about the hero's journey. The important thing here, and this is from the neuroscientists, is that stories connect us to other people through this magical thing called mirror neurons. Mirror neurons, neuroscientists say, is the physical manifestation of empathy, which leads to connection, relationships, and happiness, and that keeps us alive longer too. This is my firm put this together for the National Portrait Gallery. We were working with the people down there to think about how they could design their experiences. This is the hero's journey. I'm sure you've seen it done many different ways, but this is a useful way to start thinking about the beginning, the middle, and the end. I'm just going to jump across into a couple of things here because I'm conscious of time. Extraordinary is really useful, and you can think of this as the B rules. And this is if you come across the peak end rules, when you're trying to connect with somebody and you want them to remember something, the moments to really focus on are the beginnings and the endings and the extremes. That's the way you're going to land the message that you want to land. So you can think of this as the B rules. There is now, and this was published in 2018 by some people, principally at Brigham Young University. They've got a great experience design group of people there. So they figured out a hierarchy of experience types. And this is what I mean, what Ben was saying about this eudaimonic technology to create better experiences. So at the beginning, we just have delight, the experiences that are just catch you. And then we've got memorable. And then above that are meaningful ones. And then the ones that are actually transformational. And people are trying to figure out, I think they've got the memorable stuff. I think meaningful. Transformational is the pinnacle. That's where we really want to get to. This is wonderful from Matt. I'm fascinated by transformative experiences, and at the same time, I'm not sure they actually exist. Matt was playing a bit there, but I think he wanted to shake the tree and see what came out. Got some great responses from people because this kind of sums up. I mean, this is one of the things with experiences. Experiences have to be co-created. You can do your most with somebody, but an experience is not just a passive thing. But transformations, and I don't know if this will translate into every language, so you're going to have to forgive me. This is definitely a British expression. You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And so you can do everything you like with an experience. You can set the stage, but there are some people that just won't play. And that makes me think, almost like Edward Bernays, the father of PR, instead of just kind of trying to sell to somebody, you need to set up the conditions that they will want to buy from you in the first place. I'm going to borrow from Ben again from his book, The Age of Experiences. These are two key things about transformations. Transformations involve a plan, a conscious purpose or goal that's shared between the vendor and customer. But importantly, that plan, there's an intention. Most transformations are gradual. They're realized by a process made possible by a graduated series of experiences. So the road to Damascus thing, that kind of, suddenly everything changes. That's a really lovely idea, but just think about how nudges work in terms of behavioral psychology. Think about B.J. Fogg's work in terms of how to change people's behavior. It's not that sudden moment. That may be when you turn direction, but it's going towards something. It's when you actually go somewhere. So transformation tends to be gradual. So the idea that you might get somebody in one experience and change them is annoyingly naive. I wish it was that simple. And if you think about your own life, maybe there are moments. But when I think about myself and the way I've changed, the things that have changed me most are things that have taken place over some time, even if the decision sometimes feels kind of momentary. It's a Friday. I would feel terrible. You guys have been going through quite a few of these, and if I didn't mention psychedelic drugs, I would be missing out. Psychedelic drugs are really important. If you follow the data on this stuff, it's really interesting. Look at ayahuasca, look at LSD, look at psilocybin from mushrooms. Really interesting data that's coming through here. As a forecaster, I believe this stuff will come, maybe not mainstream, but much more commonplace and acceptable. As you possibly know, some of the counties in the States are now making this stuff legal for use. The research that's coming out by people like Robin Carhart-Harris at Imperial College in London shows very clearly that the right psychedelics delivered in the right context can really help people who have depression, for example. But this is interesting. And I think this is interesting because you can think about the difference between an experience and a transformation here. And you can think of this in terms of the difference between a cosmetic drug experience and a curative drug experience. So think about a cosmetic drug experience. You just and I'm borrowing from my friend Paul, who's in Ecuador at the moment, who's a brilliant experience creator. He says, with a cosmetic drug experience, and I think this is borrowed from Martin Seligman, the great psychologist who introduced positive psychology. With a cosmetic drug experience, you just step into the magic circle, the work's done for you. If you've ever taken ecstasy or any of these things, you'll know what I'm talking about. But the next thing, with a curative drug experience, you need to start with an intention for exploration. And if you think about it, a cosmetic drug experience is just fun, maybe a hell of a lot of fun, and it could change you in some way in that you know. But with a curative drug experience, that they are often used as a process to enhance your life, to change your life. And I think that Paul's captured something really important here. One is just kind of like, hey, this is delightful. And the other one is a potential for transformation. I'm just over my 20 minutes, so I'm going to bring that to the end and say, I hope that was interesting. This is why I believe that this is a time for experiences and it's a time for transformation. There's my email. Please do get in touch. Love to talk to you. And please come to the discussion thing that we're having next.